Much of the focus with a jumper's knee patellar tendinopathy goes to the quadriceps, but the calves are also important, specifically the soleus muscle. Here's a clip from my podcast with Ebony Rio.
The calf is incredibly important to unload the anterior knee. So when we are changing direction, it's actually the soleus that decelerates the tibia.
If the soleus can decelerate the tibia, this would be less stress on the patellar tendon when you're landing, when you're cutting. So the next step is looking at the action of the soleus. It is plantar flexion of the foot at the ankle. We have another action, but let's look at this one for now. This study looked at the muscle volume of the soleus and the gastroc, and we can see that the soleus is way bigger than the gastroc. So we could take all this advice and say, let's work the plantar flexion action to train the soleus, and let's get the muscle bigger. Let's activate the muscle with a single leg seated calf raise. This is the best way to isolate it and to train it in an up and down manner. But we can't stop here. There's nothing wrong with this. This is good to strengthen the muscle. This is good to give it the signal because it might be shut down. But we need to look at what is going to happen in the cutting action and in the landing action, or even in the jumping action. The other thing is soleus muscle stabilizes the tibia on the calcaneus, limiting forward sway. If you listen to this podcast with Dave O'Sullivan on the Just Apply Performance podcast, he talked about the soleus action in sports and how important it is. Here's his quote. When that foot hits the floor, the soleus muscle is the king. If you had to have one muscle for knee pain, that's it. The soleus takes between 6 and 8 times the body weight. He referenced this study, Muscular Strategy Shift in Human Running, where they looked at the soleus, the gastroc, the tib anterior, the vastus medialis, various different muscles in the running motion. And you can see on all these graphs, if you pause it, that the soleus is taking over for all these things, especially as the speed gets higher in the run. So what they said was, across all running speeds, soleus, gastroc, vastus medialis provided roughly 75% of the total vertical support impulse needed to accelerate the body upward, with soleus contributing as much as 50%. For speeds up to 7 meters per second, increases in the vertical ground reaction forces were due almost entirely to the soleus. What we know about muscle tendon dynamics is as you move faster, the muscle is doing less concentric eccentric actions and it's doing more isometrically. So these high forces in a dynamic action are happening with a more isometric soleus. In this study, they looked at the action of the soleus as it pertains to the ACL, and they found that the soleus muscle force tended to translate the tibia posteriorly. That was in dead cadaver knees, but it's pulling the tibia back. If we look at something specific like a single leg jump landing, how can the soleus protect the knee? And we looked at this study, muscle contributions to tibiofemoral shear forces in that single leg drop landing. And what they found was the muscles that generated the greatest posterior shear force were the soleus, medial hamstring, and biceps femoris. You can see the soleus did the most. So when you have these type of landings to protect the patellar tendon, protect the anterior knee, the soleus is working, and it's working mainly isometrically. So now you should realize the seated calf raise up and down fashion is not enough as the only means to train the soleus. It is good, but it's not enough. You should train isometrically, something as simple as the iso lunge. You get in that deep knee position, which means the soleus is doing a lot of work compared to the gastroc, and you just hold it. You get on the midfoot, the forefoot. If you don't have good capacity in the soleus, you will see that the foot starts to quiver. You'll start to see like an earthquake at the ankle. That's training the capacity of the soleus. You also have to make it work with the hamstring, with the glute. But let's look at this land here. These are often the type of lands, very shallow landing, and that iso lunge is very deep. So if we want to get even a little bit more specific, let's train the soleus at the outer range. This is something that Dave O'Sullivan talks about. This is the David Gray foam roller bridge. You can see how I'm a little bit more straight. I could even put the leg out further. It gets very difficult. But if you have patellar tendon pain, you have lack in the soleus, do this. The next video will cover more specifics, but you will get a cramp in the soleus and you need to train this.